For today's webinar, we'll be looking at getting the most from your maintenance resources. Our presenter today is Ross Kennedy. Ross is the President and Founder of CTPM. Ross is recognised as Australasia's leading authority on total productive maintenance and CTPM's operations excellence through the TPM and Lean methodology. So let's get started. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar, and I will now pass you over to Ross.
Right, thank you, Samantha, and welcome everyone to our webinar today. My name's Ross Kennedy, and I'm hopefully here to share with you some of our learnings about getting the most from your maintenance resources over the next 30 minutes. We've identified 4 areas we thought might be most useful to talk about. Why all leaders in operations need to understand maintenance excellence. The role of a benchmark self-assessment tool rather than independent diagnostics, establishing a maintenance excellence vision, and then developing an improvement plan that will engage your maintenance workforce. And hopefully, if we get these 4 right, we will get the most from our maintenance resources at our sites. I thought I'd start with a extract from a presentation that was given back in 1994, so it's some 21 years ago, in Wollongong by some gentlemen from McKinsey & Co, a very famous global consulting practice. And they were talking about the trends in operations at manufacturing and mining and metallurgical companies or process industries. And what they predicted was that in 1990, and if you compared over 20 years, and keep in mind this was done in 94, so they were saying by the time we got to 2010, in a typical operation, we'd probably find about the workforce has dropped by about 50% on existing volumes, or you may have the same workforce but twice the output. The second part of that prediction was that they saw that production numbers would reduce as a percentage, whereas maintenance numbers would increase, and logistics and min numbers would go down slightly. I think the focus or the thinking behind this was that as we automate our plants and bring more technology into our plants, we probably need less operators, but we need more people to look after the equipment, and hence the importance of maintenance. And the final slide or part of this chart was that the impact of that change, yes, there would be a reduction of 50%. So if you had 100, you get down to 50, but the reduction in maintenance would be just a lot smaller than it would be, say, in operations or logistics in the min. Now, in their presentation, they also went on to share some of their learnings, which were that the best performing companies have an operations excellence vision, recognizing the critical importance of maintenance, and have a coordinated strategy in place to implement that vision. The strategy is fully supported by corporate, plant and departmental management. Maintenance is treated as a strategic function that has substantial influence over and impact on profitability, and therefore deserves top management attention and adequate resources. They also said, on the other hand, companies where management treats maintenance as only a function which is a cost to be contained rather than as an activity that is critical to operations excellence will not perform well. And their final comment was, to win in the future, top management must understand the strategic nature of maintenance and have a sufficient understanding of maintenance best practices, such as TPM, to participate in the successful implementation of the coordinated operations excellence strategy. And as a result of that presentation, if I reflect back over 20 years, we actually went out and ran a number of workshops called Maintenance for Non-Maintenance Managers. And there was certainly a lot of interest in that at the time, because we find a lot of people in organisations find that they have a maintenance function reporting to them, but they've had very little formal training in the strategic nature of maintenance. So I thought I'd just start off with ask the audience a quick question to feel where we're all up to. We have a very simple question for you. Do top management treat maintenance as only a function which is a cost to be contained in your organisation? Or, I guess, on the other part of the equation, or do they see the strategic nature of maintenance, as we just talked about? So do they see it as a function where we've got to keep the cost down? So either, yep, that's what they all do, or we only in tough financial times, or no, they never do that. They see it as a strategic nature. So we're having some results coming in on our polls, which is putting us at 50% at the moment are saying either always or only in tough financial times, and 50% are saying no, they do see the value of maintenance as a strategic function to support operations excellence. So it's excellent to see we've got 50% there, and obviously the other 50%, hopefully some of our what we'll share in the webinar today will be of some help. So moving on, I thought I'd just talk a little bit about the evolution of maintenance approach for manufacturing, mining and process industries. So again, this concept of getting all leaders to understand about maintenance. Now, maintenance has evolved as like all professions and functions in our organisations. Originally, it was very much reactive driven. In the 50s, we got into planned, preventive, predictive maintenance, and this was brought about very much by the consequences of failure, where and out of the aircraft industry, where they were building bigger aircraft, and if they fell out of the sky, there's a lot of consequences. So they really wanted to try to stop that from happening. So they did a lot of work in developing preventive predictive maintenance, which then translated into all industries. In the 60s, they realised that the way we design equipment has a big impact on maintenance, and especially on the cost of maintenance. So we had the advent of what we call productive maintenance. In the 70s, Toyota, as they were developing the Toyota production system, realised that they needed excellent reliability of their equipment for a stable production plan and for their lean thinking to work. And that's a real foundation of the lean house. And the only way they could do that was to get the operators involved. So it's no longer just pure maintenance, it was the operators and the production people had a big impact on the reliability of the equipment. So they introduced prevention at source for equipment, which was all about equipment defect identification and elimination. Further on, in the 90s, we had DuPont, who, through their international benchmarking and looking for best practice, saw TPM and took it to the next level and said that it's not just maintenance can't do it by themselves and operators need involved, but everyone needs to be involved. And it was all about getting goal alignment in the organisation so that everyone was aligned to the operations vision. It was about getting the ownership so people wanted to take care and understand more about how to stop defects getting into equipment, and it meant engaging everyone to find the problems at the earliest possible time. So if we just look at the DuPont model, or one of the things that came out of the DuPont studies was that maintenance excellence requires support from all leaders as we strive for the stable domain of defect avoidance, because they identified there are stable domains of behaviour in organisations relating to maintenance, and that's also applicable for all functions and operations. And their four stable domains were reactive, predictive, proactive and learning, and they realised that reactive would only take you up to a certain level of performance, and you would require a lot of resources to be very good at reactive maintenance. As you got into planned predictive maintenance, you needed less resources and you could get higher performance out of your plant. And again, it goes on for the proactive and learning, and by the time you get to learning, you need a lot minimum maintenance resources because you're finding the problems at the earliest possible time and you're stopping the problems from getting in there. And hence a lot less work for your maintenance people to do. and the performance of the plant is much higher. Now, as they recognised all of this, they also went back and looked at their own plants and found that they had very much like a brick wall between the reactive, predictive, stable domains and the proactive and learning, because the reactive and predictive were traditional maintenance approaches, and maintenance people tended to look at going from reactive to plan, and that was as far as they saw, because that was what they could control within their own department. It's only when you get production and maintenance working in harmony along with everyone else and taking this higher level vision view of operations excellence that they could get to this much higher level of performance. And I guess their key learning was you need to have a clear vision of where you're trying to head to if you want to get to best practice. And hence understanding all these different aspects of maintenance and what these different stable domains are about, and the fact that they are all established by systems and measures introduced by management. So to look at all that and say, right, we've got stable domains, but how can we break that down into some elements of what maintenance best practice is all about? And we've identified that there are 10 elements to maintenance excellence. DuPont originally had 7 in their model, but we've expanded that and split some of them to make them a little bit easier. It's all about having good leadership at the start, having a clear vision and strategy, performance measures, and the right structure to get the ownership in the organisation. You need a skilled workforce, human resources, and you need a good knowledge base for maintenance. And then you have your processes, your maintenance tactics, your materials management, your planning and scheduling, your contractor management, and reliability engineering. And all those processes need to work in concert, obviously. Now, the interesting thing about that model of 10 elements is that that model works for the whole 4 stable domains. Even if you're in a planned preventive stable domain, you still need maintenance tactics, materials management, planning and scheduling. Just that you do it differently if you are in the learning or proactive phase. So what we see is that this whole model is more like a pillar of support for the stable domain that you wish to choose. And again, the best practice organisations recognise that if you go for the top stable domain and understand that and work towards that, you'll have much easier pathway than just trying to work from reactive to predictive to proactive to learning, because in a learning organisation in TPM and Lean, you have a lot of operators finding defects and fixing defects, so your traditional planned maintenance gets quite changed around and streamlined. So rather than build up all your time building a great planned preventive maintenance system, dive to or have your vision on the top one, and you'll get there much better or much quicker. With those 10 elements, we created a tool called a matrix, which allows you to evaluate where you are at your site. It's a very simple tool, but still gives you a very good indication of where you are by looking at each one of those elements and working out, are we in the bottom box or the next box up or in between box, so you can give yourself a rating of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on each element. Now, we've made that as one of the handouts for this webinar if you want to get a copy of that tool. But when we start talking about the role of using tools and benchmarking and assessment tools, the reason we developed those is because we've found that they are a much better means of engaging your maintenance workforce and getting the most out of your maintenance resources if you use the self-assessment tools rather than using independent diagnostics or diagnostic done by an outside independent group. Now, why do we say that? Well, the challenges we have found, and you may have these challenges at your site, we sometimes find that maintenance people can be rather cynical. And what we mean by that is that they tend to look at the glass half empty rather than half full. And we put that down to that unlike production people who tend to stay in one department and focus in one area or one department, maintenance people tend to go all over the site and see all the frustrations and challenges and silly happenings, and they tend to just become a little bit cynical, and they also, I guess, perceive that often production do sometimes things that they don't quite understand, and hence the equipment gets damaged, and they just become a little bit cynical. The other thing is that they tend to believe that outsiders don't understand their unique situation because their site is different. Therefore, anyone coming from outside may not really understand some of the uniqueness, and they find that what happens is when you do get external diagnostics done, they're probably very, very well done, very, very accurate, and probably give really good recommendations, but for some reason they tend to get shelved and poorly actioned. So what we've found works best is to actually educate people on what best practice is in the context of their site, or to their site, and to get your people to assess themselves using a self-assessment tool, so that at the end of the day it's them saying where the gap is, not an external body. And by getting the education first, they can often make quite a good assessment of where they are. And then by using the results and from the gaps identified in the self-assessment, you can develop an improvement plan. But the key to it is to focus on what's causing the frustrations to your people, rather than how do we get a technical, perfect maintenance operation going. Now that might sound a little bit left field, but our learning is if we can engage our maintenance people and address their frustrations, you will free their time up quite rapidly, and once you free their time up, you can start working on more of the technical side of things. So a maintenance self-assessment survey, what is it? It's a tool. It has two parts. The first part looks at the way people go about doing their work and some of the issues they have. And we have a thing called a time lost analysis, which looks at time that gets lost as people do their maintenance work. And the nature of work analysis looks at the whether people are doing reactive, proactive, preventive, predictive type work. And we ask three very simple questions. What do you like most about working in maintenance? What do you dislike most? And how can you may improve? So that's the first start of the use of the tool. And the second part is then rating each of the 10 elements based on a 10-part to each element. So it's a more detailed rating than the matrix. Now, in between all that is a lot of education about what each element is all about. So and before I get to that, sorry, the idea is that we use the self-assessment tool in the right environment, which is a maintenance excellence management awareness workshop. So you run a workshop, you get all your maintenance people, and you get all your top management people or your leaders in the organization. And this is the education of maintenance to your leaders, not just all your maintenance people. So we typically get the site leadership team and all the maintenance people, and often that means maybe a couple of workshops, because you can't have everyone out at once, and you take them through what maintenance best practice is all about. You get the maintenance people to do the Part A survey, and then the Part B, everyone does the Part B as they are educated on each element. So just for your knowledge about the Part A, the types of things we look at for time lost is a list of typically 10 items, things like not being given a clear explanation of what's happened when called to a job. And the thing we ask, do you ever get any time wasted if you get called to a job? Then you find out, oh, had I known that, I could have brought this with me. Now I've got to go back to the workshop and get something to come back. And there's time lost. Or tools not being immediately available, so you've got to go scavenging around trying to find a special tool to do a job, etc. So we ask people for a typical week, how many hours did any of these things stuff you around or cause you to lose time? The interesting thing is when we do this in most workshops that the answer is comes in at about 35%. So there's quite a lot of opportunity there, especially if we can get it down below the 10% mark. You can free up something like 25% of your maintenance resources. The other one we do is nature of work analysis, which is asking people for a typical week for the hours they worked, might be 38 hours or 40 hours or whatever. How much time did you spend on reactive urgent work? Urgent work is anything that's not within the weekly maintenance plan. Preventive predictive work, planned corrective work, or involved in improvement activities, etc., or special projects. And again, we capture a picture, and often we find that reactive urgent work is well above the 20% mark. And again, if we can get that below 5%, we're getting closer to best practice. On the Part B side, we talk about each of those 10 elements, and as we do each of the 10 elements, we ask people to fill in and rate each of the elements, and we have 10 parts to it, again to give you a more detailed understanding of where the site rates themselves. It also exposes your maintenance people to what is best practice on the right-hand side. So that's our, so there's 10 sheets, but you don't do 10 sheets at once. You do one sheet, learn about what the best practice is for the next element, then you do that sheet, etc. So that's why we do it throughout the workshop. So we found that self-assessment tools are a very, very powerful way to get your audience or your maintenance people engaged. The next thing is that maintenance excellence vision. What do we want to become, and by when? So if we start off with what do we want to become, because if we don't have a vision of where we head to, how can we get everyone to get the most out of our maintenance resources if we don't know where we're all heading? So very important that we have our vision. So things we talk about in the vision, is it about safety within our department or safety across the site? Is it working within our department or working with production and support groups to maximise plant performance, for example, overall equipment effectiveness? Is our vision about improving reliability and maintainability, or ensuring process capability of all production plant and equipment? And process capability is the equipment not only being there when we want it, but producing perfect output. In other words, it's got the precision in it. It's not just being fixed so it runs. Are we about reducing maintenance cost or the total cost of maintenance? Now, the total cost of maintenance is the cost that the company incurs because the equipment doesn't work perfectly. And that goes right across the whole supply chain. So again, it's what are we trying to strive for? Are we trying to assess ourselves, or are we going to use a recognised external assessment or a self-assessment tool like we just showed you? And finally, the timing. Are we going to focus on 12 months or are we going to focus on 5 years? So it's getting those conversations within the maintenance group to think about what is it that our maintenance vision should be. And this is where all leadership need to be involved. So the site leadership team needs to get involved in this discussion. So I thought I'd just share with you an example of a maintenance excellence vision that one site we came across as using. Within 5 years, be a maintenance group that is externally recognised for supporting their site's journey to operations excellence, where all facilities on site are safe, legal and functional. World-class targets for maintenance framed around the site's key success factors or goal line performance measures have been achieved. And what we mean by the key success factors are things like safety, quality, customer service, plant and equipment performance, suppliers, people, at costs, and they're saying, okay, from a maintenance perspective, have we getting all those right and achieving world-class targets for them? Obviously, all production plant equipment is process capable. All overall equipment effectiveness targets are achieved, so we're helping production achieve that. And the score of it on each of the 10 elements of maintenance excellence is at least 90%. Now, you might say that's pretty daunting sort of vision. Well, at our forum coming up in August, we have a site from Indonesia, Tato Mangyang, one of the bamboo sites that has been going down the operational excellence journey now for, I think, 7 years, and they've achieved level 5 of our excellence award. and they've certainly achieved all of that as part of becoming recognised as world class. So it is certainly achievable. So developing an improvement plan that will engage your maintenance workforce. Well, the model we use, once you identify your gap from your self-assessment tool, for example, and the gap, you need a strategy, and things like supporting production to implement TPM and Lean so that they will take care of the equipment is absolutely critical and take out the variability in component life. Getting time lost addressed and improving those 10 elements. And so we can set some 12 and 5-year goals, but our action plan is where do we start? And we suggest you start by using area-based teams of WAM and cross-functional teams of micro-focused maintenance improvement to address the time lost. So to explain that in more detail, WAM is work area management, area-based team that might be going in and sorting out the stores, so everything's at people's fingertips when they need consumables or V-belts or components, and it's visual and you can see if there's any stock outs by walking through, not having everything hidden away. A micro focused maintenance improvement team might be a cross-functional team, which would be mechanical, electrical, planner, supervisor, whatever, and working on how do we better allocate work so people know exactly what they need, they can have all their right gear with them, they're not wasting their time when they get out on the job. So various teams, depending on what comes out of your gap analysis, you would fine-tune what teams you would get going. So just to sum this up into the final word, get as many maintenance people involved in production cross-functional improvement team activities as soon as practical. I haven't talked about that in this webinar, but when we first start the operational excellence journey or the TPM Lean journey, we often start with production cross-functional teams where you get production and maintenance working together to look at losses on equipment, and that breaks down barriers, build relationships, and frees up time. So very important to get maintenance involved in that so they get a flavour of what improvement's all about before we then get the maintenance group and the site leadership team or your management people and maintenance personnel involved in maintenance excellence management awareness training so they can complete the maintenance self-assessment survey in an informed way. Focus your initial maintenance improvement activities, reducing frustrations by freeing up lost time. And finally, use the maintenance self-assessment survey as a means to monitor progress. And so you do it every 3 months, you repeat it every 3 or 4 months, you repeat it with your team. Now, you don't need a workshop to do that because they've done it once. You can just grab them at the end of the week and say, hey, guys, we'd like to refill in part A again. Here's 10 minutes, just fill it in, and we see how we're tracking. So hopefully that's been of some help to you about getting your most from your maintenance resources. Just a quick, how can we help you develop your capability? Samantha's spoken about membership, so we've got our CTPM membership. That matrix I spoke about, that is available as a download or handout from this webinar. So you might want to take that back to work and have a go and see how you rate. Keep in mind the average in Australia is around about the 40% mark. So we also run workshops, maintenance excellence for leaders. We run those as public workshops, in-house workshops, and that is basically a maintenance excellence management awareness type workshop. So you might want to consider running one of those at your site or hosting one or coming to a public one. And with that, I'll hand over for question time.
Great, thank you, Ross. So we'll now have question time. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand or type a question in the control panel box. We have one question here, Ross. It says, doing a self-assessment survey sounds good. However, do you ever get people giving silly answers?
Well, that can happen if you're not careful with any self-assessment survey. So it always comes back to the process you use. What we've found works best is by doing them in a workshop environment and having the people there and getting feedback from each sheet as you go. So once you do, for example, your time lost, you get people to share what ratios they ended up with, and that often get people going, oh, they're on 40%, I'm on 2%, or whatever, and get them to share some of their experiences. So you do that with a number of sheets at the start, and what you find that you start getting people getting a lot more sensible in their answers.
Good ideas there. We have another question. Let's have a look here. What is the best way to get upper management on board?
Very good question. Well, the first thing is that upper management needs to understand the strategic nature of maintenance and the importance of it. And what we strongly recommend is when you do your Maintenance Excellence Management Awareness Workshop that they attend. Now, that's their commitment to, do they see maintenance as a strategic, important aspect of the overall operations vision, or are they just treating it as a cost? And unfortunately, the only way you can get them on board is getting them to maybe bringing someone from outside to talk to them. We're happy to come along and talk to your management group about the importance of getting maintenance involved and showing their involvement in it. But it's certainly a challenge, and that's why I showed those first couple of slides about maintenance is a critical thing for all leaders to understand, because it does have a different longer term thinking behind it than a lot of other functions in the business.
Okay, excellent. Any other questions? Which doesn't look like it, so we might end it here so that everyone can get back to work. So thank you for attending. Just a reminder that our next CTPM webinar is scheduled for Tuesday the 4th of August, and it's going to be about don't let future shock derail your improvement journey. And just a reminder that the brochures and the matrix that we mentioned throughout this webinar, they are available in the handout section of your control panel where you can actually download them. So feel free to contact us at any time if you think of any other questions, or if you require more information, or if you'd just like to have a chat. Hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. Thank you.